Next, let's talk about tables. Common use cases for tables are situations in which we have a lot of data points that would be really difficult to show on the chart just because of their volume. They're also useful in situations where people might need to look up a specific value as opposed to just having a general idea of the magnitude of the data points, differences between them, overall patterns, that sort of thing. So for example, if you're looking for a house in Wellington in a specific suburb, it might be really important to know exactly what is the median selling price or the average selling price in that suburb for the size, house, and location that you want, because it might help influence your offer, whereas just to see which suburbs are more or less expensive might not be that helpful to you. Some things to keep in mind when using tables are again that the research that I described before showing how well people do at interpreting charts shows that they're not good at all at interpreting tables either. So again, think about your audience. If it's an audience that is fairly sophisticated in terms of quantitative things and they look at tables a lot, that might be okay. If it's a more general audience, really think carefully about using a table as opposed to some other sort of visualization. Something else to keep in mind is how you're delivering the information. In general, tables tend to work better in reports and less well in presentations, just because in the average presentation, you don't really have time to absorb all of these numbers. Now, one way to get around that is to use some sort of conditional formatting, as I've done here. So here we can see that the higher numbers are in red, the lower numbers are in green. So you can quickly scan and see that if you want a four-bedroom house on the south coast of Wellington, you're almost certainly going to be looking at something over 800,000. If you only have less than $500,000 to spend on a house, you're probably looking at a two-bedroom house, and even then the suburbs that you can look in are pretty restrictive. If you want to live in Caracas Bay, then in all likelihood you're going to be paying 800,000 no matter what size house you buy. So easier to scan and just get a general sense of what's going on if we do use conditional formatting. Anytime we do use conditional formatting too, it's important to consider how to show that formatting. So here what I'm emphasizing is expensive houses in red and inexpensive houses in green. We would do that in a situation where it is something like a buyer for whom a house that's expensive might be problematic because they're going to have to pay more money. A house that's less expensive is good because they're going to have to pay less money. If what we're doing is some sort of visualization for investors, where we were wanting to show how much money they would have made based on having a house in these areas, we might just want to reverse that and have the higher numbers in green and the lower numbers in red. So think carefully about those color choices and make sure that they're consistent with the story that you're trying to tell. Some other things to think about is the order in which things are shown. So as with the conditional formatting, where we're thinking about which ones do we make red, which ones do we make green, depending on what we're trying to tell, our order might be influenced by something like that too. So here the different suburbs are just shown in alphabetical order. That might make sense if we just want to make it easy for people to look up the suburb that they're interested in. But if we're trying to tell some broader story about which houses are more or less expensive, then we might want to order the suburbs that way as well, like from highest to lowest or lowest to highest, depending on what our point is that we're trying to support.